privileged today to rise to speak to Bill 27, the Renewable Electricity Act. Madam Speaker, I have concerns with this bill, many concerns in fact, that I would classify as a litany of concerns. So please excuse my lack of brevity on this matter as I proceed with the second reading speech. First of all, let me preface the speech by stating that I'm in favour of renewable energy, infrastructure and policy, when, of course, the policy and infrastructure is implemented and constructed appropriately, taking into account the current market structure. I view renewable energy as one of the tools that can be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and in turn address some of the concerns that we have as a society and as a province around global warming. But let me be clear, renewable energy programs must be implemented in a way that is respectful of the current power generation structure and, of course, power purchasing arrangements. Without this respect and trust, this mutual respect and trust, which the government has already undermined, the contractual legitimacy between two parties is severed, thereby destroying the stability of a contract and rendering it moot. Not a great environment for moving forward, Madam Speaker. Why would anyone agree to sign a contract for power generation if they knew one party has a record of backtracking on its commitments and reneging on the certainty it allows for well-reasoned, collateral-backed investment and financing? Are these concepts alien to this government? No wonder the dearth of business experience may be showing through. This is not what I would call bargaining in good faith, Madam Speaker, and it sets a poor precedent for future agreements, which could be directly impacted by this legislation. Hopefully the government figures out how business works one of these days, and eventually can move forward, because their track record on this matter has been nothing but an assault on business and thereby an assault on job creation. Secondly, renewable energy infrastructure and policy should be constructed and implemented in a way that respects jobs and prevailing economic conditions. That is the common sense approach, Madam Speaker. I know my colleague, the Honourable Member for Calgary-West, alluded to this fact earlier in debate. But let me reiterate, there appears to be a huge and unaddressed gap in the plan and in the Act, given power generation's needs of Albertans and the industry associated with this irresponsible coal phase-out, Madam Speaker. Given the government wants coal power generation eradicated, as well as all the mortgage-paying jobs that go with it by 2030, never mind the provincial unemployment rate we currently have of 8.5% and double digits in Calgary, and you don't even want to guess the stats that might be pushed forward in the likes of Hannah, Hinton, Forsberg, and others in the year ahead because of this legislation. And given approximately 50%, in fact a little bit more than 50% of our electricity currently comes from coal, what will be used to replace it by 2030? The government and their Central Planning Committee would like you to believe renewables, but the Central Planning Committee has already determined that 30% of power generation will come from renewables by that time. Madam Speaker, last time I checked, we need to fill a 20% gap with respect to power generation from that 50 or 55% to the 30%. So where is that base load going to come from? You don't seem to have much of a plan there, Madam Speaker. In my books, a decrease in supply means higher electricity prices for Albertans, not to mention the spectre of grid instability, brownouts, turn us into a third world country, and worse. So not only are you spurning unemployment through our coal phase-out, but you're also spurring higher electricity prices, further moves toward an uncompetitive environment for business and investment, and a signal to industry that we are not, in fact, a business-friendly nor investment-welcoming jurisdiction. A great combination, Madam Speaker. Talk about making a bad situation worse. Madam Speaker, this legislation appears to be haphazardly cribbed together on the back of a napkin by a government that continues the piecemeal charade which is its climate leadership plan. A plan that is hurting Albertans from all corners of the province due to its poor forethought and execution. And did I mention the unintended consequences of creating Alberta's latest tourism attraction? I think I did that before. It's called the New Millennium Alberta Ghost Town, New economy jobs indeed. Madam Speaker, but let us turn our attention to Section 7 of Bill 27. It is my understanding that the Alberta Electric System Operator, which is referred to as AESO, will hold a competitive process for renewable generation. AESO shall advise the Minister of the results of the competitive process, including the total quantity of renewables offered, as well as the corresponding costs that will be payable via contracts. Thereafter, AESO must receive ministerial approval on the quantity, the costs, and the final form of the contract prior to selecting successful participants and entering into contracts of certainty, Madam Speaker. Now, I think this section is quite pertinent to what I was saying before regarding trust, respect, and contractual agreements. A novel idea indeed. This government is demonstrating poor faith and now has a poor track record with respect to honouring contracts, as evident through the current lawsuits around PPAs. Given contractual arrangements play such a vital role in this legislation, how will banks and investors view contractual validity? The government has, whether intentionally or not, decreased the value and certainty of a legal contract in the eyes of Albertans and external investors. Or in this case, I think we call these PPAs. Has this fact been considered? I certainly hope so, as a foundational structure of this legislation is dependent upon it. How do we get people to invest in renewables? Because, Madam Speaker, if we don't encourage other people to invest in renewables, I worry that we're going to have to do it with government funds. And those funds, Madam Speaker, are covered in red ink today. Secondly, another glaring concern for me is how this section enables the minister to choose winners and losers with respect to renewable generation. This is a problem, Madam Speaker. I want to look at our provincial partners in Ontario and see their renewable electricity plan. As of September, the government scrapped plans for $3.8 billion in renewable electricity projects. $3.8 billion. That's a lot of zeros. One motive for this decision? High electricity costs. Interesting. But correct me if I'm wrong. Did I not state this as a risk earlier in my speech? Unintended consequences, Madam Speaker. AESO is intended to be a not-for-profit organization that manages and operates the provincial power grid. They are intended to work with industry partners and government to make sure reliable power is available to consumers and industry as required. But with a vision to the future of Alberta, Madam Speaker, a vision of opportunity and hopeful return to vibrancy in this province in the future, Madam Speaker, that we all hope for. But given the above information, one can surmise that AESO is intended to be an independent organization, operating arm's length from government, Madam Speaker, not tied to and attached to and influenced inextricably by. However, the legislation we're looking at reads counter to this, undermining the independence of AESO. I know my colleagues have echoed this sentiment, Madam Speaker. The language in this bill corroborates the statement in more ways than one. It explicitly states that when the minister provides direction, AESO must comply, as evident within Section 14. Can someone please explain to me how this once independent organization, doing the best for Albertans and industry and consumers, is now not going to be a simple and direct tool of the minister? NDP worldview, indeed. An interesting lens to look through. It would be my hope that government respects the independence of this organization and develops an internal system of checks and balances to maintain its autonomous nature, again, in the best interests of Alberta, taxpayers, consumers, and industry. That is how we succeed, Madam Speaker, by working together with the different sectors of this economy. Madam Speaker, in order for organizations such as AESO to function efficiently, they need to remain arm's length from government. I suspect that we would have heard that from some of our esteemed colleagues on the other side of the floor in years past, that requirement and need for independence from government. I cannot stress enough how important this is, and it is my fear that this government is disregarding this fact. Madam Speaker, overall, this bill exposes Albertans to unknown costs to subsidize green electricity generation, which I personally believe can and will stand on its own in time in a competitive marketplace. That will be the innovation that we see. That will be the initiatives that we see from industry, and if we subsidize it too much, Madam Speaker, we will kill the opportunity to do it right and to do it well. It also allows Cabinet to make unaccountable political decisions at the expense, and I say again, in solid, hard, red ink, at the expense of Albertans through the minister's ability or inability to pick winners and losers in renewable energy, and to subsidize them in an irresponsible manner possibly, not in the best interest, both short and long term, of Albertans. Additionally, it fails to account and support auxiliary infrastructure required to make diverse renewable resources work in Alberta. This legislation, like the Climate Leadership Plan, appears to be slapped together without any semblance of a strategy or framework to consider the current electrical market structure, grid stability, economic conditions, job protection, or, of course, lack thereof. Madam Speaker, I'm in favour of renewable electricity. I think we're going to see us reach those goals in time. I believe it has a place and a future in our province, but not as this current cadre of anti-coal crusaders intends, nor on the irresponsible and costly timelines they propose. Renewable electricity generation should tap into the innovation and ingenuity of our citizens and invoke the Alberta advantage, setting a positive environment for investment, not subsidies, something the NDP worldview seeks to advantage. The Alberta advantage seems like an alien concept. Renewable generation should work hand in hand with current market structures, market realities, complementary clean coal technologies, and other electrical generation, from cogen to geothermal to hydro and others. Mr. Speaker, for these reasons, as well as many others associated with this irresponsible, ideologically driven push into a world, an all too familiar world these days, of unintended consequences, in spite of what I choose to believe are the best of intentions, I cannot and will not support this bill today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.